annual budget workshop. This is the budget workshop for the 2019-2020 annual budget. Appreciate everybody who came. This is going to be a bit of a lesson, so, take notes. If you're not familiar with how the city budget works, don't feel bad if you don't get it all under your belt within an hour, because you won't. There's an awful lot to it, but our city manager, Tammy Canada, does an excellent job of explaining the basis of our budget, how it works, and what we're looking at this year. And at this time, I don't think we do the flag for
No.
this. Let's turn it over to Tammy. Tammy, take it away.
Yep. All right, good evening. So as Mayor Swift indicated, tonight is our presentation for our budget workshop. And our goal is to present an overview of staff's proposed fiscal year 1920 city budget in a straightforward, thorough, and understandable manner while providing the opportunity for questions, dialogue, and input. Staff will present the proposed city budget for fiscal year 1920. The city staff has continued its efforts to maintain financial constraints in order to be sustainable. Council has directed staff to maintain a fiscally responsible approach to providing local services and continue to present the city budget in a straightforward and understandable manner. The fiscal year 1920 budget objectives are deliver a balanced city budget using minimal reserves, maintain the current level of service to the community, incorporate the fiscal year 1920 council manager goals, keep the city's budget process open and easily understood. So tonight, staff is requesting questions, dialogue, and input on the proposed fiscal year 1920 city budget from the city council and the community. That the council, by consensus, recommend to staff either to bring the city budget forward as proposed or implement any revisions they deem appropriate and present the city budget for adoption at the city council meeting following the workshop. So budget at a glance is what I use to present the budget. It's a great overview of the budget. The city budget is a key communication tool which illustrates to the public the city's strategic direction, sources of funding, and types of expenditures. This presentation seeks to distill the budget document into a useful set of tables, charts, and diagrams for the use of the general public. It is developed by staff based on policy direction from the City Council, reviewed by the public and council, and eventually adopted by the council. Staff then implements the city budget over the course of the fiscal year, which is July 1st through June 30th. The city's total combined proposed annual budget for fiscal year 2019 to 2020 is $15,692,000. Of this amount, $7,100,000 is for the capital improvement program.
And Tammy, what's the capital improvement program?
So that is like your street projects or any kind of infrastructure improvements. Typically, it's projects that are improving our capital. The budget is linked to the city council, city manager's strategic goals developed each year. These goals are at the heart of what our community expects from its local government. In turn, these goals are woven throughout the fiscal year annual budget, which allocates the resources necessary to achieve our shared vision. For 1920, goals are maintenance of the McHenry Sewer trunk line, construction of new well 1A, wastewater treatment plant evaluation, explore areas of funding for SSJID surface water connection, continue the review of the sign ordinance, and continued efforts for the meter replacement program. So status of our 2018-19 City Council, City Manager goals, construct a new McHenry Avenue lift station. We are estimating that this completion is due maybe late July. We are getting close. The hiccup with the railroad will set us back some, but we're hoping to continue forward on that. Maintenance the McHenry sewer line. Phase 1 of the sewer line located at the wastewater treatment plant has been completed, with 2 more phases to be completed in fiscal year 1920. Design and construct, design and construct new well 1A, we have completed the design for one well A, and funding application has been submitted, and the rate study is about 50% complete, which is a requirement for the funding. Explore areas of additional revenue generation, we implemented the RV storage at City Hall, Police Department, and the electronic sign advertising. Review of our sign ordinance, staff has been working on the review and will be soliciting for feedback and comments from local businesses and residents in the next few months. It is estimated to be completed by the end of the year, December of 2019. The big picture with all the funds. For the fiscal year 2019-20, the city is projecting $11,659,000 in revenues with a total of $15,729,000 in expenditures. This results in our expenditures exceeding our revenues, or what is commonly called a deficit. The balance of the funds needed to cover the projected expenses will come from special revenue funds or reserves of relative funds. So our citywide revenue source categories, we have charges for services, our taxes, which include sales tax, property tax, and gas tax. Other revenues, revenue from government sources, grant monies, license and permits, special assessments, with our total revenues there of the $11,659,000.
What's the other revenues? That's $2 million.
So that's like charges, do I have that broken down with me? That would be like funds for development impact fees, or connection fees, those kinds of, there's multiple, but would be some of the major ones in there. Or funding, I think this includes, probably the biggest driver of this one is the well one financing funding is in that number. So that's a good, that's 1.5. But it's money that it's still revenue shown as coming in.
But it's debt.
It's debt,
Right.
correct,
Okay.
yes. And that's not a constant in the other revenues of,
Okay.
So here's a graph, just broken out, showing you the different revenue sources in a pie chart there.
I don't see anything on, like interest on money we have. We don't get anything like that anymore?
We do. We get interest, and that is part of the other, it's part of the other monies too. You will see it when I do just the general fund, it's actually broken out in that fund. Citywide expenditures, our capital projects, the $7,100,000. General fund expenditures are at $4,400,000. Enterprise is at $3,495,000. Debt service, which means payments that we're making on any loans that we have outstanding, $528,000. We're using $87,000 from some reserve funds. And then special revenue funds, about $74,000, which adds up to the $15,692,000. Funds are monies or resources set aside for a specific purpose. There are 4 general types of funds in the city budget. They're identified as the general fund, which is the most common fund that we refer to. Enterprise funds, which are like our business activities, so sewer, water, storm, and special revenue funds, that's your gas tax, your developer impact fees, and those kinds of funds. And then our debt service funds, which are those representing debt that we owe.
So when people receive their bill every other month for their water, sewer, and garbage, the water and sewer part are for enterprise funds.
Correct.
Right? And it's those enterprise funds that are helping to fund a lot of these projects that are specific, let's say water.
Correct.
You pay for your water, the money goes into the Water Enterprise Fund, which helps pay for water-related infrastructure projects in town.
Correct. And then again, here's just another pie chart showing the separation of where all those expenditures are going. So now we'll go on to the general fund, which is our primary operating fund of the city. The general fund is the fund most people refer to when they talk about the city budget. The general fund pays for community services such as police services, community development, street maintenance and landscaping, animal control, weed abatement, park maintenance, community center, personnel, finance, city management, city council, facility maintenance, and the library. For fiscal year 2019-20, the city is projecting general fund revenues of $4,243,000 and a total of $4,660,000 in expenditures, which is resulting in a deficit of $416,908. Part of that deficit includes using equipment reserve monies, the $87,195, reduction of our debt service reserve for the civic center and the community center of $166,000, and then a decreased deficit of $163,428 in the operating budget.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. It's kind of difficult, all of this, nothing's on the monitors.
They must have went to sleep. I'm so sorry. I had them on earlier, so they must have went to sleep.
Actually, Tam, that brings up another question. Is this on YouTube?
Yes, it is.
Okay, on YouTube land? Perfect.
Okay.
And
I
had a quick
apologize. Thank you for saying something.
Thank
Tammy,
you,
I had a
thank you.
question too, just, it's probably the most obvious one, but, so, our income's 11.6 million, our expenditures are 15.6 million. Are we gonna talk about the $4 million deficit? Or is that something I'm not quite getting?
So,
I just don't know if everybody
Sure,
understands.
sure. So, yeah, what happens in that case, when you look at the overall city budget, that includes a lot of your enterprise or your special funds. So we have monies that are accumulated in our capital funds for the enterprise. So that covers a lot of that deficit is from capital improvement projects. So capital improvement projects are typically paid from funds that we've accumulated or the loan, for instance, too. So
Right.
that's where
But
that.
that loan is included in our income, not in the, or is it also
Correct,
accounted for?
correct, but there's 7 million in capital projects, and it's like 1.5 for the well. So you still have 6 million or 5.5 million that you're pulling from special revenue funds and stuff to cover projects.
All right.
So I go through, I do go through a little bit later, we go through the general fund, then we'll go through the enterprise funds also. No, that's okay. So equipment reserve are funds within the general fund specifically promised for equipment and expenditures. Debt service reserves are funds within the general fund specifically promised for the civic center and community center debt repayments. Revenues, as is Escalon's practice, the revenue projections in this budget are conservative. The city's two largest sources of revenue are property tax and sales tax, which are comprised of 72.26% of the general fund revenue. Revenues for 1920 are $325,000 or 8.8% more than the adopted fiscal year 1819, which was $3,678,934. And including the following. Property tax revenues include an approximate increase of 1.5% from the projected revenue for fiscal year 1819. So in 1819, we are experiencing an increase of about 61,000 or 3.5% from the adopted budget. Sales tax revenues include an approximate increase of 8.8% from the projected revenue for fiscal year 1819. In the 1819, the city is experiencing a projected increase of 161,000 or 17.2% from the adopted budget.
So you are working with conservative numbers. Again, you look at the pattern from 1819, what's really happened, and then you really pare down that projection for 1920. And the reason I want to point that out is that budget, where we're looking at, in the end, in the totality, a small deficit, that's how typically, when you get trues up with the audit, that deficit's negated because of the way that you budget. You budget
Correct.
conservatively on your revenues. Okay.
So the projected ending revenues for fiscal year 18-19 are $3,912,000, which is an increase of 6.4% or $233,000 from the adopted budget. Most general fund revenues have remained stable. So here's the general fund resources, our property tax at $1,800,000, retail sales tax at $1,200,000, other taxes, $335,000, transfers in from special revenue accounts, which is, we receive monies for supplemental law enforcement, and we transfer some money into general fund to help cover our police department personnel. And gas tax money covers some of the maintenance for our streets and roads. Those are transferred in also. Other revenue at $210,820. License, permits, and fines at $138,000. Charges for services, $119,000. Monies from properties, are, this includes some of our interest in there too. The interest that we earn on our monies is in that number there. From other agencies, $17,000, $700. And again, property tax, sales tax are our largest contributors at consuming 76.26% of the general fund revenues.
Tammy, on the other revenues that you're saying that we were showing that is where interest off our investments are coming in. Is that broken down anywhere in the budget?
So it's actually monies from properties, and it is broken down in the revenues section, which is section number 8. And the biggest, because there are departments, it is on, I think, so, on actually page 2 of the revenues, right about in the middle almost, there's investment earnings on interest and loan interest, and then we get rents from cell towers.
So
So
the number looks to be around 45,000 there.
yeah, plus the 6,400 and the 16 would all be included in there. And then there's also,
18, I think.
then there's another section that has, for the recreation, we also have a cell tower there that gets money. So, part of that monies from property is on page 6 of the revenues, under general recreation, cell tower rents, there's another 22,000.
And this all goes into the general fund?
Yes,
And what page was the last cell tower on?
on page 6.
So totally from those types of income, what are you looking at? Approximately.
I'm sorry, what was that?
What is the approximate income from those investments or those interest bearing, or however you want to put it?
That monies from properties is at the 117,000?
Okay, and that fluctuates, of course,
Of course, yes.
but that's not kind of like an unearned income, right?
I'm sorry, that's what?
Like an unearned income?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I mean, yeah, we're making money off of what we
They're investing
have.
return.
We're investing.
We're not up there working daily for it.
Right, yeah.
It's like a passive income.
And then there's just the graph chart of the revenue pie graph. I said graph, sorry, it's a
Tammy,
pie
a
graph.
brief aside, under the police department revenues, so you get a ticket and you have to pay a fine, where is that number at in there?
Well, there's not much in there.
Well, that's why I want to bring that up to dispel the rumor.
County.
Now, where does that ticket money go, the vast majority of it?
Last time I did any research on it, it's been a while, we saw approximately 10 to 13 cents on the dollar of any fine. At best, we will see 25 cents on the dollar of any fine issued. The rest of that money goes to the state and county.
Okay, so it's really not a viable source to fund a police department from? That's,
Not a revenue maker, that's for
No.
sure.
that's just a
You don't issue
misnomer I wanted to
citations
dispel.
for revenue, you issue citations. for-
What's the justification for such a little return? Is because of their administrative costs, is that what they're saying?
That would be my belief.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and then,
For a breakdown, that's generally what we've got.
and some of the tickets have designated so much money goes to each of them. So every time you issue that, it's already, a dollar goes to the county, or a dollar goes to the state, or wherever it is.
Similar
But-
to our parking citations, as you're aware, we don't get all the money from a parking citation because the county and the state get their percentage.
You fund all kinds of things. You fund the courts, you fund judges' retirements, you fund all kinds of things on that.
Certain DUI programs, DUI fines, that'll come out of the DUI fines. Portion of that fine money will go into DUI programs.
If you write somebody a ticket and they take it to court and you have to pay the officer overtime, you lose money.
You're losing money. Right, okay. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
So we'll move on to the general fund expenditures. Again, it is our practice to be practical with our projections in the expenditure budget for fiscal year 1920. The expenditures are $307,000 more than the adopted fiscal year 1819. That was $4,352,000. And included is the following: salary and benefit increases of approximately $240,000 based on the increase for 2 additional police officer positions. One would be hired in July, and the second would be hired in January of 2020,
We will be voting upon this when we vote on
if the budget
tonight.
is adopted, correct, as being presented.
Sure, yeah.
Increase to police overtime for coverage of 2 officers per shift and training while the new officers are in their field training period also. We increased that from the 18-19 budget, 17,000. The original adopted budget. Negotiated salary increases of 28,000 includes master officer pay, longevity pay, salary increases for general service unit and management of 3%, deferred comp contribution match for PEPRA employees of 2%, general services and management 2% for general services and management, 3% for the Escalon police officers. It's an increase of 1%. They previously had 2%. And then we had our increase in our public employee retirement system. Okay. So here's our appropriation, how it's broken out by department. Public safety is your largest at 59.78%, $2,800,000. Development services, $591,000. Culture and leisure is $590,000. Public Works, $417,000. Our transfers in and out, which that $166 is the debt service for the Civic Center and the Community Center. Equipment reserve at $87,000, and then management costs of $22,000 for the total of $4,660,000.
The culture and leisure, is that like recreation as well?
It's recreation, community center, the library.
And that's broken down somewhere as well?
Yes, under the expenditure tab, each of the departments are there broken out.
Okay, we'll be able to.
And under the expenditure tab, there's actually a summary page that shows each of them. And then there's the pie graph.
I had a question back
Sure.
at that. So public safety is police, that's it, right?
It's police and animal control.
Okay, and that's just basically salaries and pensions and stuff like that?
And that's their operating budget also.
Okay, and how many people make up both those departments? I know we have, 10 police officers?
So in this
You gotta have
budget,
10, right?
in this budget, it would be a total of 11, or 12. 12 including, so it would be 11 officers, chief would be 12. Our police service manager is 13.
How many animal control?
And then animal control, we have most of the time, we try to keep 4 part-time, and we have our community service officer, who is like a 3/4 of a personnel. So he's not full-time, he's part-time.
It's up to like 17, 18 people.
Yeah. Mhm.
12 reserves.
To make up that.
And actually,
And 12 reserves.
and 12 reserves.
What he just said.
Because a portion of the budget for the salaries goes towards
Training.
paying reserves.
Paying reserve officers also, yeah. So, and actually, under section 3, there is a position allocation that breaks out what positions are allocated in the departments too.
Okay, just, thank you.
Uh-huh. So capital outlay included in the fiscal year 1920 budget is the appropriation of $87,195. This is a decrease from the 1819 budget of $5,000. We'll be replacing 7 computers between City Hall, Public Works, and the Police Department. We need to replace our radio base at the police station, which is basically the radio to the cars. Replacement of a vehicle mobile computer mount and installation for a police vehicle, 2 body camera units, IT switch racks, servers, upgrade our firewall, camera licenses, switch installation at the community center, and then replacement of cat cages at the animal shelter. These items are to be purchased from the equipment reserve funds. Staff's general fund summary, impacts to the general fund reserve. The general fund reserve is funds that are segregated for future use. The city's general fund reserve set aside money for operating budget reserve, equipment reserve, and debt service reserve. For fiscal year 2019-2020, it's being proposed operating revenues of $4,243,000 and expenditures of $4,406,000 with the deficit of $163,427. We are receiving transfers from other funds into the general fund, which is gas tax funds for street maintenance of $145,000, traffic safety funds for police of $20,000. Those are funds that are collected for parking citations primarily, and I think that we also get some of our citations in that they're actually collected in a separate fund. So, SLESF, Supplemental Law Enforcement Fund, $74,000. That's $60,000 towards police salaries, and then there's an additional $14,000 being contributed this year for some capital outlay. So total funds transferred into the general fund is $239,000. So we estimate the beginning reserve balance for July 1, 2018, oh, that should be 19, sorry. Should be $3,167,642. Again, with the revenues of $4,243,000, expenditures at $4,406,000, shows our deficit, our one-time reserve expenditures, and the reserve expenditures for debt service. We will also get a payment on an interfund loan to the sewer industrial of $104, giving us a estimated reserve balance for June 30th of 2020, not 2019, for $2,845,735. That is broken out in the reserve funds. Operating budget reserve will be at 40.2% with $1,804,000. Equipment reserve at $118,000. Debt service reserve at $706,000. And then our CalPERS unfunded liability reserve at $225,000. So the beginning reserve balance is $367,000 more than the estimated balance in the fiscal year 18-19 budget. And then the ending reserve balance is $42,488 more than the estimated ending balance for fiscal year 18-19. So we're starting with our beginning balance higher than what we had proposed in the 18-19 and higher ending balance than proposed in 1819.
And that's a result of the audit from,
So that's not based on the audit, that's based on staff's projections right now. It is based on some from the true-up when we did our audit for 17, 18. So,
if people had to look at one page to get a thumbnail of the general relative health of the city of Escalon's budget, would this be the page that they'd want to look at?
for the general fund, yeah, which is on section 4.
Right.
Yes.
In other words, you like to see a nice big reserve balance number, operating bond, you like to see everything close as you can to balancing out with your general fund,
Right.
slash deficit, so, okay.
Does that represent the percentage we've set for ourselves?
We've set 33% for the operating budget reserve, and we're currently at 40.2%.
That's what I needed to know.
And that's another barometer. Are we setting aside the kind of money we need to set aside?
Correct.
So far?
Very good.
Following items are capital outlay items that will be funded from enterprise or special revenue funds, a police server replacement, Klutz application project. Those are the two that were from the supplemental law enforcement fund. Purchase of 2 new portable 6-inch pumps through the sewer enterprise. Purchase of a replacement chlorinator from water, and annual replacement of aerators for sewer. City's capital outlay expenditures can be found in section 6 of the budget.
Let me ask you a question. We're doing a study right now with our sewer. Would we want to wait and find out what the conclusion of that report is rather than go out and spending the 48,000?
Well, those, we typically replace those at the end of our fiscal year, so the study will be done before, we
So we'll have
we
an
move
idea to
forward.
review this. Okay,
correct.
good. 'Cause I don't know if that's the appropriate thing we should do.
Right. So included are the following worksheets, graphs, charts and graphs to help illustrate the narrative information provided in staff's proposed general fund budget. Section 1 has a budget at a glance. Section 5 has our general fund revenues and expenditure color pie charts. Section 6 has the capital outlay expenditures. Section 7 has the city budget fund analysis, and in that section, it shows each of the funds that we have, their starting and ending balance, what their revenues are, what their expenditures are. So that's a great place, too, to see an overall picture of all the funds in the city. Section 8 has revenue projections, Section 9 has expenditure projections, and Section 10 is our capital improvement program. The city's capital improvement program is a 3-year planning program of current and future capital projects. Typically, projects include street reconstruction, overlays, water, sewer, and storm improvements, construction and/or renovation of city facilities, park developments and improvements, land acquisitions, and city beautification projects. Revenue sources can come from all 4 city funds. However, most of the city's special revenue funds go towards CIP projects. The CIP summary and the full CIP can be found in the section 10 of the budget. And the funds analysis, as we just discussed, can be found in section 7, where it shows all of those special funds.
And again, most of the city's special revenues are your enterprise funds, your water.
No, that's not special revenue funds. So your special revenue funds would be more like your impact fees, your gas tax, our streets and roads monies, local transportation funds, Measure K funding, those kinds of special funds. For enterprise funds, though, their capital improvements are all within their fund themselves.
Right,
So
okay,
they have different. So in water, there's, I believe, 4 funds. There's typically, in most enterprise funds, an operating fund, a capital fund, a depreciation fund, and then if they have debt service, then there's debt service funds. So the operating, of course, is for your general operation that you have to do. Yeah, day-to-day. Capital is for capital improvements, and then depreciation would be for an ongoing large repair, like we set aside money annually for replacement of pipes, those kinds of things.
I have a question, just in general. Why are so many different funds? Is that something set down like by the state for forming of the government? You need these little funds, or you know what I'm saying? Is that something that
yeah.
the city comes up with?
It's kind of both. So typically you get funds that are allocated, that can only be allocated to certain uses. So putting it in its own fund is an easier way to track it and ensure that those monies are being spent for the appropriate items.
Keep it all really separate to account for
Yes.
all of it.
So like for the gas tax funds, there is 4 different gas tax funds. Now, technically, we could combine all of those those funds. In the past, it was always common practice to keep them separate. I haven't combined them. I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I just haven't made that leap yet, because there is a certain section of that gas tax that you can only use on engineering. So there's different segregations for the monies that you receive. So that's typically why they're separated out. Same thing in the enterprise funds. We collect, when you collect somebody's, why am I drawing a blank? When they connect to our services, when you collect that money, that is to go towards capital improvements or to help, make sure that system is prepared for them. When in the water bill, there's operating monies that are collected and depreciation monies that are collected.
So the 2 biggest funds that drive the general fund or the incomes is property tax and sales tax.
Correct.
But the biggest revenue source for the city is city services, like paying for water and stuff. I think that was the biggest one in the beginning there, right? And that money goes towards, that doesn't go to the general fund, right?
No,
That goes
no.
towards,
It's primarily to the enterprise or the business funds.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But portions of that money are paid for employees too, though.
I don't have that broken out.
My
But
point
there is some, yeah, because of course there are staff that is allocated to
Employees'
those
hours are
departments.
distributed through all the enterprises.
Yeah.
The other thing I have a question for you, on the $7 million we're spending on capital improvements annually, what percentage of those are done annually? In other words, do we complete the $7 million this year in our fiscal year?
I think I get into that in a little bit here.
I can wait if you want to go on.
Yeah,
with it.
let me,
But I would like to know what percentage annually do we spend of our capital improvements and how much is carried over?
okay, so for fiscal year 1920, our capital appropriations is a total of $7,100,000. Carryover projects from 1819 is the community center parking lot, the street overlay for Escalon Avenue, which is just the small section between Libby and Miller, Jordanolo Water Service realignment and overlay. So those 3 projects are carryovers from this current fiscal year 1819.
What's the value for that? I didn't add it up.
That's about 720.
So last year's budget for CPI was what, total?
I want to say it was 8 million.
Okay, so 600,000 carried over from the previous year. You accomplished 7,400,000 roughly in that year.
I think that there's some of the projects that we've put on hold too, so I think it's a little bit less than that we've accomplished.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. So the new projects for 1920, McHenry Sewer Trunk Line Rehab Phase 2 and Phase 3, construction of well number 1A, Walnut Avenue reconstruct water line replacement, our annual industrial pond sledge removal, various streets slurry seal and crack seal, industrial flow meter replacement, wastewater treatment plant roadway and berm improvements, our senior room exterior wall repair, and then animal shelter improvements, facility improvements, sorry.
Why would some projects be delayed from one year to another? What are a couple typical reasons?
Sometimes it's just timing of staff getting the project together. Sometimes it could be, for instance, Escalon Avenue. We had to have PG&E move poles. There was a delay in getting a right-of-way so that we could put in the sidewalk, and then getting that all through PG&E, and now AT&T. So we should be, actually, that one should be completed the first of next fiscal year. But Jordanolo, it was just a timing of getting everything out there. for that. Community center parking lot is another one. We have to be sensitive about when we're going to do that because of the activities at the community center, because it's not a one-day thing. So we have to make sure that we are planning that out at a good time where we're not affecting rentals and we're not affecting recreation.
On the street reconstruction and the binder, we've got the general improvements to South McHenry Avenue widening project. Is
Yeah.
that budgeted in here under the various streets, or is it?
No, I just listed out the most significant projects. So that 15,000 for the South McHenry is, we have been, we've gotten some federal funding for that. The problem with federal funding is it requires a lot more paperwork. So I need to reach out to a consultant to assist us with that, because staff just doesn't have the experience or the time to make sure that we get it all. So that's why that's in there, just to get that ball rolling, because with the federal, you have to have, Caltrans has to approve your plans, your documents, you have to do the environmental and all of that. So.
Is it still a 1920 project, or is it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, so what's in the budget right now is only just to start the paperwork and get the process going. I wouldn't anticipate that we would do construction in 1920. I think it would be more 2021.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Enterprise funds are self-supporting activities that provide services on a user charge basis. The city operates 4 enterprise funds: water, sewer, stormwater, and public transit. Total fund balances for the water, sewer, stormwater, and public transit are estimated to end the budget year for 1920, water with $3,300,000, sewer industrial at $300,000, sewer domestic at $291,000, stormwater at $261,000, and transit at $117,000. Water, the city received authorization from the state to move forward with the new Well 1A and have submitted for funding approval. Part of the funding approval requires a rate study, providing evidence that the rates will support the repayment of the loan. The rate study is approximately 50% complete at this time. Monies collected from the city of Tracy continue to be set aside for future connection to the South San Joaquin water treatment plant. For sewer, the total sewer is $605,000, broken out between the industrial and the domestic. Annual sewer rates Increases are reviewed each August based on the rate study completed in 2016. Industrial rates include the repayment of the interfund loan to the general fund. Current budget includes keeping the contract operator to run the wastewater treatment plant, and the projected fund balance includes the CIP projects for the McHenry lift station and the trunk line. The city also did get some funding for those projects too. Storm has $262,000. Storm operating costs are currently exceeding the revenues, and the process to raise these rates would require a vote of the residents and are handled differently than water and sewer. There has been an increased cost due to the MS4 permitting required by the state of California. The Transit Enterprise Fund is essentially funded by pass-through revenue. The level of the transit services is directly related to the revenue we receive. A private provider through a contract with RTD operates the city transit service. The city must continually strive to provide sustainable, basic services to its citizens while being fiscally conservative, maintaining sufficient reserve in order to sustain future budget impacts and constraints. With the adoption of the fiscal policies, the city council has given clear and concise direction to staff to implement service to the community to ensure that the services provided will not change the quality of life for our community. So the city budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 meets the city council's budget objectives. Specifically, this budget is a balanced budget with the use of minimal reserves, maintains our 33% operating reserve level, maintains our current level of service to the community, incorporates the council manager goals, keeps the city budget process open and easily understood. The budget provides the organization with the direction and tools necessary to maintain a consistent level of city services and continue the internal transformation to take advantage of our strengths and improve on our weaknesses. Thank you to all city staff members for their hard work on this year's budget. It's a team effort and will require staff members to continue to work as a team. The continued city council commitment, clear direction, and invaluable support assist staff in meeting the needs of the city. Thank you. And I am still open for any questions.
I just want to tell Peter something. I was told, Peter, a long time ago, when you asked that question regarding why funds are broken up, it's because they want to stand alone. That everything that we do should be able to stand by itself. And that's what I was told.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and it probably also aids in the transparency of the whole. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of numbers to look at, but if all your numbers are presented out there, again, they're as transparent as there possibly be. We do have a few minutes left. I'd like to be able to break at 6:55, so we have a few minutes left for questions from the audience. Please come up, state your name and your address, and make the question quick.
Pam Gomes, 1534 Catherine Avenue. I noticed that the police officers, you are adding 2 new officers, which is a good thing. One is starting in January as opposed to both starting in July. So how are you proposing in your multi-year out costs to cover 12 months worth of salary instead of just 18?
So when we hire the second one, there will be some other reductions in the overtime too. So there is still, we are still going to have to review our revenues and make sure that we can sustain this. I budgeted it out for about 3 to 5 years, and we're still sustainable even with them 2 of them at full time. And honestly, the second one is in there for more than just a half a year because that's the way I budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, she knows the answer. She's like,
Good evening, council members. Sean Stroman, 2445 Yosemite. I will second what the previous lady mentioned. Thank you for getting Chief 2 more officers. I think that will be very helpful, especially with recent incidents that Chief and his staff have had to deal with. My only concern is with, and don't give me an evil glare, Justin, is with capital improvement programs. Right now, I've been a resident in Escalon, 15 years, and there is no avenue for residents to suggest a capital improvement program or capital improvement project. So while I understand that, we have to do the trunk line rehab and the pond sludge removal, ultimately, I think we need to think about a way to suggest a project to be considered for next year's budget. More bang for your buck, if you will. And the reason I said don't give me an evil stare is one of the things that I've been notoriously complaining about at Planning Commission is speed enforcement and a possible installation of a speed bump system on our more heavily traveled roads. I live on Yosemite Avenue, right at almost to Campbell, and I'm surprised Chief and his officers don't have my name and phone number right beside dispatch because there are no traffic breaks. And yes, I understand it's mostly my neighbors, but we need to start looking at the internal traffic study of the city of Escalon and figure out, okay, where should we install some sort of temporary measure to cut down on speeding? Because quite honestly, it's almost to the point where it's getting ridiculous. I was taking my trash can out last week and almost got hit by a car because a gentleman from Oakdale decided to speed from Justin to Campbell. And I have a 4-year-old son. I do not let him play in our front yard, and that's the whole purpose of why I moved to Escalon, for him to enjoy the front yard we have, right in my little area, we probably have 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5 families with children ages 6 and under, and they all share the same sentiment. We won't let our children play in our front yard for that very specific reason. So, thank you for getting Chief the officers that he needs. It's a start. I'm not gonna say it's the end, but I think now we need to work on, I mean, sure, we have to drain the pond for sludge. No one wants that to be built up, but at the same time, we need to think of things that could benefit the community besides pulling pond sludge out.
A great idea, a good idea. I think it's good to get input from the residents as well, too. And after the meeting, I'd like to get together with you, because there may be some things that I can do now immediately without putting in the budget to help that, so.
Well, sounds great. One of the things that Chief did with Tammy's help is put up the traffic control sign, and that lasts all about a day because people recognize this isn't doing anything, and then they'll just gun the engine and head on down the road. So sure, let's talk, because I think and it's not just the residents on Yosemite. I mean,
Sure.
you have that problem in a lot of areas.
Sure.
So, and when Chief only has 2 officers on,
It's hard.
what do they do, you know? So, all right, thank you.
Sean, appreciate it very much. Thank you. One more?
Got one quick question. Oh, yours are never quick, Dave.
Tammy, when you were finishing up there, just before you summed there, you mentioned that the money from Tracy was going to the water treatment plant.
No,
It-
she didn't.
It was being set aside for the connection to the SSJID water treatment plant.
The water treatment plant, no, not.
Water, not wastewater,
Ah, okay,
water.
okay, that's
So
what
it's
I
the
was-
surface water treatment plant.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that, thank you. And I have speeders on Sultana too. They were 425 Sultana.
Let's go with Gary, and then Tammy, if people have further questions, how do they get their answers? What's the best and most succinct way to do it?
I guess it kind of depends upon what the question is, but I mean, you can reach out to me.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
very good. Gary?
Gary Haskin, 471 Cabernet Court. Back to almost the beginning, it's the City of Escalon fiscal policies. In here, there's a couple reference to RDA, which never happened in Escalon, and that's about 9 years ago, according to Tammy. I was just speaking with her. So this thing probably should be updated. Also, on economic development, there's a statement that starts to aggressively pursue new development and businesses. And is this going to be a policy change? We're aggressively going to go out and look for a new home development? And if not, maybe that should be taken out of the fiscal policies.
Right, in other words, further define development. What are we talking about?
So this is in our fiscal policies that we adopted quite a few years ago, and that was, that's part of it in there that says to aggressively pursue new development and businesses that add to the city's economic base.
Yeah, it says and
yes.
businesses. Businesses, super, unless we want to start deviating from the growth ordinance, I don't think we want to aggressively pursue. And if that's
Yeah.
your policy, that's the way it is, but if it's not, it should be stricken.
Okay,
So I can bring it back and we can review it.
duly noted? Okay, all right.
Yep.
Appreciate it, thanks. Want to give the council a 5-minute break, because it looks like we're going to have a packed house and a full meeting tonight, so if you don't mind, just kick back for a few minutes, and we'll be back again, ready to start the regular council meeting at 7 PM. And this workshop